And so this is also how we create private variables, is by storing them in a function. There's no other way in JavaScript. We don't have block scope like Ruby does, for example. We have a lot of people who take this class who come from a Ruby background, and that's a little bit confusing at first, but there's only, at least at this point in time, there is, in future generations of JavaScript, there's going to be a let keyword that will allow you to have block scope, but for now we don't. Cool. And so I spoke a little bit about creating scopes, about how the scope is not created, or variable scope is not created until we invoke the function. Cool. And then, so we have these nested scopes. How do we know which one wins when we have two variables with the same name? And so this is called precedence. I like to play this game where we go around the room and we pretend that we're the JavaScript interpreter and we say what line we start in. So for example, what I would say, if I was going to do this previous example, I would be like, okay, so I'm a JavaScript interpreter. I just created a variable G. I stored the string global. Then I would see the blender. I would skip over the blender. I would store this in memory. Skip over the blender. Then I would go down to this invocation where I would call it with blueberry. That's when I come into the function body. And in the function body, fruit is now blueberry. So B is blueberry. Then we're saving Y as yogurt, a string. And then we see this function. We skip over the function body until we get to this last line here, in which we call the function. And at that point is when we go into the function body, and we alert blueberries and yogurt make a blueberries swirl. And then at that point, this function is out, and then it comes out here. And it goes into the next line, if there was a next line underneath. So that's kind of how, just sort of like going through how the code would run, and like a very crude understanding of like how it's run. So who wants to go first? And then we'll just go down the line. The first line is the easiest one, so it's better if you go first.
Take it.
Okay, all right, Grace.
So G is global. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, so you're just storing a string global in G. Yep. And then Joe.
Bar 1 is local.
So the next line that it runs is going to be this line, right?
So what am I supposed to say?
Just how it would run, how the code is actually going to be run. So you could just say that there's a function. Function called go, yeah.
So you stored that in memory, and then you invoke go.
So we skip the function body, right?
Yep.
Skip the entire. So this part we skip. That's really, really important. I'm going to say like 8 times, but that's super important. And then we.
And then you call go.
Call go. And then Kim, what happens next?
L equals local.
Yeah, we go into the function body. L equals local. And then William. Is your name William?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you would be on the next line for the G variable. You'd set that.
In here. And then Andy.
Then you're gonna alert G plus inside go.
And what's G?
G will be the local variable in the go function.
So it would be in here, right?
Yeah.
Great. And Kevin?
You're gonna alert G outside of go.
Yep, and then so once this function's done running, it's gonna return back to here. It's gonna exit here and run the next line, which is going to alert, what is it gonna say? What is it gonna say?
Outside go.
What is the G part?
Oh, in here. Or global outside go.
Yeah. So this is just an example of how the code is running to help you understand that whatever variable in the most local scope wins precedence, and that's the variable that's the value that's going to be printed out. So since G here is the most local to that scope, G is going to overwrite any memory of any other variables if there was any, and it would alert here. And then the most local to this global, right, is going to be the global G. Any questions about that? Joe?
Does that whole, does go come off the stack then after the execution is done?
Yes. Cool. And so back to block scope. Let's play the game again. Where did we leave off? We left off at Ben. So what's the first line? What happens the first line?
Create the variable in block and set it to false.
Mm-hmm. And then Jake?
I'm sorry, he said which one, the top?
Yeah, he said the top one.
Okay, so we skip that and we go to the bottom, correct? If in black?
Well, we have this one still.
Oh, okay.
So this is a for loop, this isn't a function. It's a little bit misleading because it does have a block. So a block is defined as any area surrounded by two curly brackets that's not an object. So whenever you see in JavaScript a syntax where you have two curly brackets and it's non-object, that's considered a block. In a lot of languages, a block would define a scope. But in JavaScript, only a function block defines the area of like private scope. So this is the line here. Do you know what this line does? No? No worries. So it's going to loop, right? This is a for loop, and what this for loop is says, start at 0, keep adding 1 to I until I, or while I is less than 5. So it's going to run whatever is in this body that many times. So it's going to set end block to true 5 times, just to make sure that's true. And then what's the next thing that it runs? I'm sorry, oh, Tanner's next. Okay.
Next we go down to if in block and the console log, which is, it's gonna pull up the false, even though we set it 5 times true because it's out of scope.
So what is if in block gonna do? Sorry, you skipped over that pretty quick.
That's gonna invoke the console.log and it'll ask is there a block scope, and then it'll add false because the other variable in block is out of scope for the first one.
Absolutely. So this if is going to evaluate whether in block is true or false. If it's true, it's going to enter into the if block here, and then it's going to console.log is there block scope, and this is not. So this is going to return the opposite. Since in block is true and this is not, this is going to evaluate the false. So the question is there block scope in JavaScript? Well, I don't know. Let us ask. False. Mm-hmm.
Would it ever get into that block though, since it's false?
It is true. It's true though. We set it true here.
Oh, right.
And since we don't have any, so that's all the global scope. So it's all in block is just going to be true. So it's not private. So if this was a function, if this for loop was a function, then when we changed in block to true, it wouldn't affect this in block up here. But since we don't have block scope and this is all operating on the global scope, that's why we can, well, that's why this is true here.
So var in block equals false, that's a global variable.
Yeah. They're all, everything on this.
Because there's no child, there's no
function. So everything on this page is global.
It's global.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. So I have the exercise. We go to the very first slide. We have the bit.ly, which is func exercises.
There's a question, I'm not sure. Do you need the var? And then you said maybe the for in block.
The question is, do we need var?
Yeah.
No, you don't need var.
Okay.
I didn't want to give it away though. So the question was, do we need var here? Oh, I can't delete that. But do we need var, this var? No, you don't.
Not a red herring.
What's that?
You don't need it, but it's.
If you put it there, it's not gonna matter. Yeah.
Someone asked if you could touch on the let keyword. No. Well, we cover let in scope and let in the advanced JavaScript course on Front End Masters.
Yeah.
So if you don't.
Yeah. Basically what let, it's just like instead of using var, you could say, I can't edit this. Instead of var here, you would say let. And so you say let I equals 0, and then that block, I would be in that block. But I've never used it before. I don't have any experience with it, but that's the idea. And if you take the advanced JavaScript course, it will go more in depth on that, and more in depth on scope. Like there's lots of aspects to scope, and you can really dive deep into the mechanics of how the JavaScript engine works, and like how it parses it and goes through, and more in depth. And that's really, really interesting, and it will really inform like your understanding of how JavaScript's really working in the background. The way I do it is just kind of like willy-nilly, kind of just the basic idea of how it's run, but there's a lot more to it, actually. Cool. So here is a link for the function exercises. And we're going to start with scope. This is a little different than the exercises that we did yesterday. The scope exercises are test-driven. I have a doc here, the README, that will explain exactly how to do it. But the basic idea is, let me see if I have it open. No. The basic idea is, if we go here, is that you're going to, you can copy this, you can clone down the repo, or if you're familiar with that, or you can just download the zip. Once you download the zip, you can go into the scope folder. You open your spec runner in your browser, and that's going to show you a bunch of failing tests. I'll just do it. I'll just show you how to do it. Let's see. Okay. And then let's see. So I just downloaded. I just have, and you unzip it. Scope exercises. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. So inside there we have our spec runner, which we open in the browser. And you can see that we have 1 pass and 11 failures. And then, let's see here. Then we want to open up this function.js. And you're going to open it with your text editor. And here we have where our failing tests are. Let's see if I can. So we have this describe block, which is going to encapsulate all of our tests. And you see that we're running it immediately down there at the bottom. And then inside of the callback function here, we have before each. So before every it block, this before each is going to be run. And we have this var actual variable that's just initialized to undefined. And so before each is run, actual is going to be set to null. And then inside of this it block, we're going to explore this, the rule that this string describes. So this one says, a function has access to its own local scope variables. And in this callback function, we are going to be testing that. So here we have this function, and then we have a variable named inner. We set actual to name. We call that function, and then we have this expect statement. So we expect actual to equal inner to be true. So we want this conditional here to be true. So you could just actually type in true, but that would be cheating. But what you want to do is go through and change these 3 question marks to what it would be. Either it would be null or undefined or some string. And so you go through, and then to check your answers, you can, here, let's just make this one false. You save it, and then you go to your spec runner, you refresh your spec runner, and it will show. So we can see that this one didn't pass. And then if we wanted to actually pass, we'll just change it to what it is. We save it, and then we refresh the page, and we see up here, can you guys see that? See up here that we have 1 pass. And this will show you the rest of the ones that you need to change, and it has a little description of the error here